Hello guys. I have recently been advocating for a move towards a generally more selfish attitude for men. I thought this was an appropriate attitude given the realities that men have to face in today's society. My move to a more selfish approach has been met with criticism as to the moral aspects associated with it. I'm presuming one of the most valid arguments against it is the lack of empathy that seems to be stemming from such a worldview. However, that is far from the truth. I believe that such a worldview as the one that I'm proposing can lead to a more empathetic attitude towards the world in general, and I will explain my reasons why I believe this is so in this video. Prepare yourselves, as this is going to be a long video, or longer than my regular ones, as I'm going to try and tie in varied aspects of what I have talked about over the past year together in one video. We will first start with the foundation of our reality, which is of course the brain, and we will build from there. Your brain is made by many parts: the reptilian brain, or lizard brain if you prefer, the limbic system, and the neocortex. The lizard brain will control your breathing and autonomic functions that are required to occur at all times. The limbic system will control your emotions, and the neocortex will be responsible for more complex thinking. We will start simply so as to explain how there is not really a dichotomy between the ancient parts of our brain, the lizard and the limbic system, and the new and more developed parts of our brain, which is basically the neocortex. The neocortex is where your complex thinking might occur. It contains within it our frontal lobe, where logic is said to be based, and also the inhibitory functions which prevent any and every thought in becoming an action or spoken words, along with our ability for abstract thinking, and of course it contains within it many other functions. The emotions are stored in the limbic brain, and they can in turn promote physiological responses which are felt, such as in the case of anxiety, as an increased heart rate. Many people will glorify one part of the brain and feel disgusted that we will contain within our brains another and more ancient part. However, those people would indeed be very wrong. One brain structure does not exist to reign over the other, and one is no more valuable than the other. For example, information is stored in our brains in the form of memories which borrow functions from every part of our brain. These memories contain within them emotions, visual information, auditory information, language, and physiological responses. It is important, therefore, to understand that emotions can actually activate higher centers of our brain, and small bursts of anxiety are said to increase your ability to reason, whereas prolonged anxiety can do the exact opposite. Fear can also lead to you making very intelligent decisions that puts you out of danger, whereas phobias are simply holding you back. In actual fact, the information which is often categorized automatically in our brains can and often does contain emotional connotations. These emotional connotations form biases as to how we interact with people and how we tend to make decisions. We have no control over this, but it certainly isn't a rational way of making decisions, and all of us do it automatically. For example, if we have a negative emotion associated with one single individual, a group of people, animals, brands, or whatever else it might be, then we will forever have, in any decision that includes that particular group or that particular stimulus, a negative bias towards it. Whereas the opposite can also be true, where people can think positively towards something just because a certain stimulus is included within it. That's because the stimulus brings forward an emotional response, and the side effects of that would be a deeply biased memory and a deeply biased decision making. This would have served us very well in the past, where a person would learn to avoid to eat what could cause him harm and avoid certain dangerous animals, for example. Our brain was not designed to deal with statistics and such dry data, even though that data is a lot more accurate. It simply is there and exists to learn from experience. The importance of our emotive brain is something that has been manipulated by advertising companies and governments in the form of propaganda in order to push through a message which they believe is very important for us to know. Therefore, if we are to proceed to a model of the world that makes sense to us, then we must conceptualize a world where emotions and all sorts of emotions are important, if not more important than our rational thinking. As such, mastery of our emotional world is something that will prevent us from being manipulated or have our opinions swayed in whatever direction the governments or the mass media wants us to. Unfortunately, that very basic science lesson was necessary in order to admit certain truths. One of those was the fact that the brain does not exist without emotions, and that emotions are an essential part of being human. This led me to look into emotions slightly deeper and fight against the popular misconception that certain emotions are good and others are bad. Through personal experience and experience of dealing with people who themselves have also gone through a lot more serious hardships than I have, I understood that addressing even the worst emotions that you have in you gives you a lot more control in your personal life. Therefore, I refuse to adhere to the dichotomy which is prevalent in popular culture today, that dichotomy which speaks of the preference of the so-called good emotions of pleasure and happiness over the bad emotions of fear, anger, and sadness. I took all of those emotions to be essential in the making of a human being, man and woman alike. Though the prerequisites of acceptable social behavior vary vastly between the sexes, the emotions experienced do exist in both the sexes. However, it is my understanding that every emotion, despite its unisex name, is experienced differently between the sexes and also from individual to individual. Thus, there is no need to think of any emotions as weak or feminine. I have also found so far in the manosphere that a man is given no other emotion other than anger, which is seen as the masculine emotion in order to express himself. That has led him to lash out to everyone else, including society, and when that emotion is also taken away, a man will in turn turn inwards into a path of worthlessness and self-hate. Those are indeed very dangerous emotions that can take us down very dangerous paths, though if those emotions are felt, they also need to be experienced and assessed as to the reasons that brought them on, so as to move on past them into the next stage. As such, I found myself in a place where all aspects of self, the higher brain functions along with the lower ones, were equally valid. The good and the bad emotions were equally valid and helpful in understanding myself and experiencing a full human experience. That meant that, as a man, I had to develop both my intellectual capacity, that is, give ability for my neocortex to acquire information and to grow, but also I had to also evaluate my inner world using that information that I had already acquired. You see, when you're dealing with the brain, you are in constant search of acquiring enough information for the brain in order to understand itself. And though that is completely impossible to do, you can at least understand how the operating system may have certain bugs in it, and how certain experiences may have introduced malware that is making it malfunction. Understanding where these experiences lie, you can at least expect the malfunction or learn to bypass it before it happens. The next aspect in my life was learning to enable human connections with people. Understanding the realities of modern masculinity that are beyond the control of the individual man, and I'm specifically talking about laws that are targeting men and fathers in specific, the misandry seen in the mass media and social media, the gynocentrism that goes rampant in society. A balance must be found for a man in order to be able to navigate this landscape. As I said in a previous video, a man acts many roles in his life and he plays a different part in each one of them. The general honesty of himself is somehow compromised by his professional and personal perhaps obligations that he must attend to. Those roles do of course compromise the opinions that he might normally be able to express towards his friends, for example. However, a man in those situations can be honest as to the moral compass that is guiding him in his life. I guess the balance comes from the control that you exercise in order to not shove your beliefs in someone's face, and by simply living your own life based on those beliefs. No one will bother you if you're simply trying to live your own life, and you should continue along your life's path. Male disposability does not care if a man is living a different life, as long as he is at least being productive. Of course, the honest expression of all your emotions might be slightly compromised, but those emotions can be at least addressed on your own free time. I guess one of the most important things that a man can create in his own life is his own and personal, if you would like, safe space. This is a space where a man can express himself freely around people that he trusts and he can call his friends. A man can as such create his own gang of friends, and a safe space becomes the place or the places where the gang meets. I believe that is a male need that we keep forgetting in this day and age. In this situation, a man does not have to be the leader. He may simply participate in a community of friends where he can freely express himself, do certain activities with them, and exchange opinions about current events alongside theories about life, God, the universe, and anything else that might be of interest to him. This is the network of support that a man can create for himself. But at no point should this network of support be something that he expects to always be there for him. In male friendships, friends commonly do not call each other all the time or search for each other. There is an inherent understanding within men that men will take care of themselves. But if there is something wrong, they will help. But again, a man must be able to take care of himself first. That is expected of every man in every group. Like every relationship, it requires some give and take in order to create a symbiotic relationship between all participants, that of course all of the members benefit from. This should not necessarily need to be explained, but unfortunately in today's day and age, men fail to create long and lasting friendships. It is time, I believe, to reignite the male friendship that holds people together and helps them grow, and provides support for them. Now we have reached the last part of this video where I will explain the 3 tenets on which I base my entire worldview. In the last video, Good Guys Finish Last, I explained how an individual who first looks after himself can be seen by the outside world as an asshole. Within MGTOW PUA circles, there are people who are pushing for men to be more self-centered. Especially in the PUA circles, there is a distinct subsection that would do anything in order to achieve what they want, and what they generally want is sexual gratification. Though sexual gratification can be achieved by maintaining the mindset I'm proposing here, sexual gratification is not the goal. The goal is to create a balanced man, a man who grows intellectually, understands his emotions, and pushes himself in the areas that matter to him. In addition, this particular mindset is not one where you would be seen as a user of society. It is not a mindset that wants you to take revenge on society either. There is no place for hate towards the world or women in this mindset. What I'm suggesting instead is a quiet rebellion of the male mind, a rebellion that starts from within and helps a man to grow and survive in this crazy world without hating it. This mindset is based on 3 very simple tenets. 1. Selfishness. 2. Leadership. 3. Empathy. I will explain each part of this mindset and as to how I believe this is a continuous process of self-development, starting of course with developing a man's own self. Of course this works for me, but that does not necessarily mean it would work for you. Therefore, it is important that you keep this in mind before proceeding. Don't take anything I say at face value. Analyze it, digest it, and develop it further if you like to something that works for you. I believe every man's life should start from himself first. I term this tenet selfishness, and it relates to the last week's video. A man must understand that he has an obligation to himself first and then to everyone else, if there are people in his life, of course, that are worth his effort and time. From this obligation that a man has to himself, everything else follows. Through this apparent selfishness, though, comes selflessness, and I will explain later on how that comes about. Especially in the early stages of an adult man's life, the priority for that man should be to himself and only to himself. A man is a work in progress and never a finished product. A man develops, adjusts, learns, and grows continuously in order to improve himself. A man is always one thing, though, and that he must not forget. He is a man. He must feel proud of that and realize that all the work that he is doing is for personal development of himself and the achievement of his dreams, and in order to feel proud when he looks back to where he was and where he is now. If you look at yourself and you see a finished product, then you're not really examining yourself too closely. Especially in your early years as an adult, work, study, and education are vital in providing you the tools to develop into the man that you want to be. Notice that though I mention work here, which should lead you to acquire finances and resources, I don't think that's what this is all about. Within this tenet, a man must focus on what he thinks to be important to him, whether that allows for the acquisition of resources or not. If at this point a man does not know what is yet important to him, then a man must utilize this time in order to find himself and also find what's important to him. As the man grows in the areas that he wants to grow in and solidifies his worldview, he becomes more dominant. In this situation, I do not mean dominance as in the social hierarchy, but rather a sense of certainty that flows from within. This certainty can come from perhaps acquiring knowledge, from looking within yourself and understanding your core strengths and principles, along with weaknesses, and addressing your personal issues. That, alongside with the growth that a man has in his areas of passion, a man can become more dominant in his life in general. That is to say that a man can become a leader in his own life. As a man makes the final call in how he lives his own life, any person who wants to participate in that man's life by definition has to follow him by accepting that fact. This means, of course, that the man does not need to impose himself on other people, especially the people in his own life, and allows them to live their own life as they please. But in order to participate in that man's life, a person must make concessions, or at least be able to naturally coexist within the realms of that man. That can be as far as relationships go and as far as friendships go. You must understand that I'm talking about leadership here and not pure dominance. Leadership means that you pay attention to how people relate to you and how they also have their own needs. By leading people in general, you must pay attention so that those people also have their needs met by interacting with you. And that's where you need to know not to impose yourself. Leadership doesn't simply mean do whatever you want, but do what you want and make sure that the people that you're leading are happy with how you are. If the people are unhappy, that is not your fault. These people are simply not people who can coexist with you and need to go. At no point should the selfish part of the previous tenet be overruled. You don't suddenly have all the surplus time or resources in the world for everyone else. But if you do tenet 1 right, you will have some surplus. And that takes us to the last part of this, empathy. This is where it all ties together with leadership and selfishness. As your selfishness starts to create results that are more tangible than simply the acquisition of resources, knowledge, and confidence, and you start to develop mastery, then your leadership may be able to move on to the next stage, that of empathy. At this point, you're able to empathize with people and do something about it. I'm talking specifically about people who may be going through the same things that you're going through or went through. Your experience will allow you to connect with people on a deeper level and be able to help and nurture people close to you. When it comes to interacting with the opposite sex, we commonly refer to these relationships in the red pill world as parasitic. Indeed, as Brifold's law would suggest, those relationships with the opposite sex are by their very nature parasitic. Women will indeed extract things from you. The difference is, now you have grown and you limit your exposure and you only allow what you're happy with to be extracted from you. You know yourself now, and you know what you want, and you have more or less achieved many of your goals. At this point in your life, you're able to interact with the opposite sex in a way that doesn't feel parasitic to you. At times, when I read the red pill on Reddit, or especially when I listen to MGTOW videos, the relationships between the sexes are being portrayed as that of the relationship between the parasite and the host. The common suggestion, especially from Red Pill, is that we revert the script and become ourselves the parasites, or the users if you want, where a man can obtain utility, i.e. the vagina from a woman, and in turn walk away when his needs are met. The fucking dumb mentality, if you like. Those kinds of interactions I think are perfectly normal for when a man is at his selfish or leadership stage. At the final stage, a man recognizes that certain interactions with people both provide him with benefit and he also provides them with benefit. A man might also keep people around that might be benefiting him in ways that are not necessarily reciprocated in equal coin, and he learns to be okay with that. As his leadership grows, he's able to see the needs of his friends and partners and relate to them on a deeper level, understand their hardship, and helps those who are worthy to him. Empathy, I maintain, can only come from a point of strength. Otherwise, what you have towards those people is sympathy. Sympathy does not necessarily offer any utility other than the feel-good factor for the person who is better off than the other one. The man at this stage does not feel better because he's so much better off than others. A man at this stage, he feels content either way and is able to relate to others, not out of need, but rather out of kindness. This video does not negate any of the previous videos that I have made so far, but I believe this is the natural progression of man, following a path of self-improvement and dedication. At no point does a man become a servant to the feminine. At no point does a man put his needs second to anyone else's. At no point does a man invest himself into the realm of the gynocentric. A man does what he knows to do best. He learns, adapts, and leads, things that are inherent in all men. The mindset proposed in this video works independent of women and relationships. It is nothing more than a framework for a man to develop his own identity. That is all I had to say. Thank you very much for listening.